Dana Sciuto, and I am a third-year fine arts and education double major. And I'm here today to talk to you about something that I am very well acquainted with: failure. So, my ability to fail is unsurpassed. I have failed in just about every way imaginable. I have failed academically until now. I have failed professionally. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you today, I have had over 30 jobs. I have failed socially. I have 2 friends. I've failed romantically. I have numerous exes that can attest to this. And I have failed politically because I hate to tell you, I don't vote. So for all you gamers out there, the best way that I can explain this is my ability to fail is epic. When it comes to failure, I have consistently rolled a 1. So, like mastering any art, I started young. By the age of 12, I had been kicked out of 9 elementary schools. My school file was thicker than a phone book. I was best friends with the principal. I was in his office constantly. And I was involved with different psychiatrists and social workers that were trying to help me work through my severe behavioral and social problems. I'd been going through different sessions and guidance and treatment with them since the 1st grade. So I started experimenting with drugs around the age of 12. And by the time I was 17, the only thing worse than my attitude was my substance abuse problem. I'd been expelled from 2 different high schools, and by 19, I decided that I was on a road that probably wasn't going to allow me to live long and prosper. So I decided that I was going to go back to school. So I enrolled back in high school, and I was put into grade 10 classes. So at 19 years old, I was in class with peers that were 4 years my junior. This was an incredibly humbling experience for me, and I barely passed high school and went on to a much hated career in a call center. I actually worked in numerous call centers, but I kept getting kicked out of there too. So let's fast forward a little bit to about 25. And by the time I was 25, I had a fairly decent job working in finance in Toronto, but I kept moving laterally, and I kept hoping that there would be that moment for me, that I would get that one tiny promotion, that step up the ladder, where I would have a moment of happiness or feel like I was a success. But I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that moment, it never came for me. I was miserable constantly, and I thought it was the job, that if I just changed jobs, I would find a better job and find my happiness, but it never happened. And one day, I'm standing in the middle of Yonge and Bloor with my $5 coffee in my fancy suit, and I went, what am I doing? And I walked into my boss's office and I quit. And that was it. For better or worse, I was never going back. Now, you would think this would be another failure that I could add to my list. But in reality, all of these failures had built up to something more. They'd built up to a revelation. And that revelation for me was the lower you fall, the higher you'll fly. And I decided that I was going to go back to school and I was going to pursue my passion. So I did. Now, deciding to go back to school, it took a lot of courage for me. But because I wasn't an academic success, I didn't really have the experience to apply to some of these large universities. I didn't have guidance counselors and parents. And I know you're thinking, where were her parents? The truth is, they did the best they could with the resources they had available. They simply were not prepared to handle a student with my severe, extreme academic and social challenges. So I applied to university on my own. And it was overwhelming. And standing up here today, I'm thinking, how can I best explain this to you people? And the way for me to do that is to embrace my inner geek. So, whoops, apparently I fail with technology too. Right. If applying to large universities was like the movies, no one would feel worthy of applying. Now, when you watch the following clip, I want you to think of Alice Cooper as the registrar's office, and I want you to think of Wayne and Garth as the students, or the applicants. In this case, they are me.
No, stick around. Hang out with us. Cool. Yeah, we'll stay and hang around with us. With Alice Cooper. We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
So when I first decided to apply to university, I was overwhelmed. I felt unworthy. I was intimidated. I was embarrassed by my past and the fact that I was not an academic success. And I wanted to be, and I wanted this so badly. When I decided to go back to university, I was 100% sure. But a part of me felt like no matter how much I wanted it, I wasn't going to get in anyways. And that's not such an unrealistic thought because of rigid admissions criteria. Because really, may the odds be ever in your favor. When you're applying to some of the large universities, you are just a number. Now, the next clip is from the movie The Hunger Games. And when you're watching this clip, I want you to think of Katniss as the applicant. And I want you to think of the judges as a large traditional university, the admissions office. That got their attention, didn't it? So Katniss is clearly a strong candidate. So why isn't the admissions office paying attention? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is simple. Rigid and inflexible admissions criteria. Not everyone fits into these tiny little predetermined boxes. And when I first went to apply, one of the requirements was that I put together an artistic portfolio. So I did. But much like the arrow and the apple, I knew, because my academic background wasn't strong, that my portfolio was going to have to be something truly exceptional, outside the norm, that would get their attention. So I put my portfolio inside of a floating helium sculpture, and I had that delivered to the dean's office by a friend of mine in a rather terrifying clown costume. Yeah. In hindsight, this might not have been my brightest move, right? But I'm glad I did, because it's who I am. My second application, but needless to say, I didn't get in. My second application was to Bishops. And right away I knew I was onto something special. Bishops was the first university that, instead of just looking at my academic background, they had me in for a personal interview. And they sat with me and they asked me, "Why do you want to do this?" And my answer was genuine. I said, because when a student approaches me and they have extreme academic or personal challenges, I can say, I understand. And I actually do. And I can say, I've been there. And it's because I actually have. So they didn't try to fit me into these predetermined boxes. Bishop's University, they saw through me. They saw through to the core of me as an individual. They supported my goals, and they supported my quest for a meaningful education. My university works for me, and it works for all small liberal arts students, because Bishop's University in total and other small liberal arts universities, they have small populations. There are 2,400 students in my school. My average class size is 28. My teachers and my colleagues, they know me by name, for better or for worse. And Bishops offers these permissive spaces within which students can learn how to succeed and how to fail meaningfully in a real-world context. So when I fail, I'm given constructive criticism. I've given real feedback as to how I failed and how I can learn from my mistakes. And I have to tell you that today, academically, I'm rolling a solid 11. So what's happening with undergraduate education? There's a crisis going on right now in these large universities where these students are receiving these these diluted education. They're receiving this education that is low quality, and they're not allowed to fail constructively. And it's creating this sense of student apathy. So really, why is this happening? What is happening in these large traditional universities? What's happening to undergraduate education? At the beginning of the 21st century, many colleges and universities are not focused primarily on undergraduate learning, but instead they've become distracted by other institutional functions and goals. And this leads me to my theory that it's becoming an undergraduate degree. What that means is that undergraduate education is not preparing students with the skills that they need to succeed in the 21st century. Now, undergraduate education is more popular than ever. This is a limitless revenue stream. But what's happening is undergraduates are being milked for every penny possible and provided a low-quality education in exchange, because this money is being directed into grad programs and research programs instead of put back into and reinvested in undergraduate education. Now, this is not just the institutions and the large universities' fault. The students have to share responsibility for this. And that makes me, today I can explain to you that student life is best described in one of two following ways. The mullet mentality. Undergraduate education is all business in the front and party in the back. Undergraduates, they're diluting their intellectual pursuits by learning how to funnel beer. What happened to coming to school to learn? And this can be further explained. In Academically Adrift, undergraduate students aren't really learning anything. The authors conducted a 4-year study of 2,300 undergraduate students over a dozen universities, and they concluded that 45% of students demonstrated no significant gains in critical thinking, analytical reasoning, and written communications during the first 2 years of college. And 36% of students showed no significant improvement over the entire 4 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you today, what are we learning? If we included dropouts into these findings, the numbers would be even worse. Why is this? Because students are adopting the Fight Club mentality. Because this is your life, and it's ending 1 minute at a time.
The first rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club.
Much like Fight Club, once undergraduates are into an undergraduate program, they're not talking about the program that they're enrolled in. Student apathy is at an all-time high. No one is talking about the quality of their education. No one is talking about the dilution of intellectual pursuits. No one is challenging large institutions to provide a meaningful education with real opportunities for students to fail in a constructive way. Now, undergrads are in for a big surprise. By drifting through their undergraduate education, they're taking these habits of apathy into the real world. And when they graduate, they're getting out into the job market and finding that they have no idea what to do with their degree. And this is leading a lot of undergraduates to now I need a master's philosophy. And what this means is that in a competitive market, the master's degree has become the new undergraduate degree. And many graduates are finding that they have to return to school. Now, I don't know about you, but because of this phenomenon, the only thing that I'm thinking is, oh my God, I have to go through the applications process all over again. So what are we going to do about this? Are we going to share responsibility, or are we going to sit back and let this continue? I say that students and institutions alike have to share responsibility and work together to dispel apathy from undergraduate programs. We need to fight to save middle-class Earth. Now, in watching this next clip, I want you to think of Gandalf, or the White Wizard, as small liberal arts universities. And I want you to think of his army as small, 21st century, empowered, autonomous, small liberal art university learners. And I want you to think of the orcs as large traditional universities. Now let's watch what happens when you have vision and momentum. potential of small liberal arts university educated students is blinding. And even though large traditional universities work to make undergrad applicants feel unworthy, even though they have rigid, inflexible admissions criteria, and even though they're providing a diluted, low-quality education, small universities like Bishop's are coming. They're charging full force, whether these large institutions are ready for us or not. And if they're not willing to accept these changes, then they need to step aside. And they need to accept that small universities like Bishop's and St. FX are coming, whether they're ready for us or not. So let's recap the battle for middle-class Earth. We need to realize that the one ring to rule them all approach when it comes to admissions criteria isn't working. And we need to challenge large universities to provide undergraduate education that promotes authentic learning experiences with opportunities for students to fail in safe and meaningful ways. And we need to shatter student apathy. Students need to take responsibility for their learning and be a part of the conversation. Because if we're not talking about the quality of undergraduate education, then we can't change it. J.K. Rowling gave a commencement speech at Harvard University. And when I watched her, I gotta say, I got a little choked up. I really did. Because I realized that failure isn't wrong. Failure isn't bad. Failure makes us who we are. And one of the things she said during her commencement speech was that hitting rock bottom is a solid foundation from which one can build a life, as failure forces us to examine who we are. I have failed in numerous ways, as I explained to you today, ladies and gentlemen. But I realize now, with Bishop's help, that failure has made me an incredibly strong and effective person. And I can take anything that this universe has to throw my way. And I think the only way that we can teach students in the 21st century how to succeed is by teaching them how to fail and helping them to build that foundation that they can take out with them into the real world. Ladies and gentlemen, I have hit rock bottom, I'm proud to say, so many times that I now offer guided tours. It's called teaching. Thank you.